On ABC Radio Melbourne, you're with Jon Faine.
Good morning, Thursday morning, the last day of May, the 31st of May. The Age newspaper late yesterday broke a story about Victoria Police faking breath test results. For years, Victoria Police have vigorously denied that they set quotas for police officers enforcing the law. Now, they're forced to admit that not only are there quotas, they call them performance targets, but they are quotas. Not only are there quotas, but they fake the results of tests in order to meet them. So, what does this mean for this mind-boggling unethical behaviour? A mindset of cheating, of breaking your own workplace rules, let alone the law, and tampering with machines that are supposed to be tamper-proof. Where does it leave the rest of us? What does it mean for the enforcement of law across the board? Well, the boss of professional and ethical standards in VicPol is just wrapping up a press conference and joins us in a few moments. What does it mean when you can't trust the people who we trust to enforce the law, when people who are sworn to be truthful turn out sometimes not to be truthful? And what does it mean for paper trails that are as completely bogus and made up as the national accounts of, well, I could mention a couple of industrial superpowers, couldn't I? But what does it mean for the rest of us? Well, we'll ask all of those questions and see if we can get you some serious answers this morning. Well, just a short while ago at Victoria Police Headquarters, Assistant Commissioner for Professional Standards Command, Russel Barret, stood up to the microphone and tried to explain something that I would have thought is bordering on the inexplicable. How can it be that 258,000 alcohol breath tests have been falsified over more than 5 years by rank-and-file Victoria Police?
It's very disappointing that I have to stand before you today and announce some incredibly poor behaviour by members of Victoria Police. Late last year, the TAC informed us that they had some queries about the anomalies within our PBT data. What transpired from there is Victoria Police commenced what is, in my view, one of the most complex and lengthy investigations of that data. If I can just step you through what that means. We've investigated the data of 1,500 preliminary breath testing devices that are used across our state. That equates to, across the last 5 years, 17.7 million tests. What we have identified in that data is that 258,463 tests are falsified. So if I think about the number, 258,000 tests, 250,000, that's a very, very large number. That's 1.5% of our total tests across a 5-year period. Last night, we issued a directive to all members of Victoria Police that this practice will stop and stop immediately. We've explained to them that from today on, this practice will not be tolerated. We've let ourselves down, we've let the community down, we've let our road safety partners down. Victoria Police is a road safety leader and prides itself on its efforts to reduce road trauma in this state. Today is a disappointing day for Victoria Police in the context of the great work that's been done by our organisation across many years to reduce road trauma. What will happen from now is that we will commence what is going to be the largest workplace guidance exercise undertaken in Victoria Police. We will be going out to every workplace and speaking to every member and explaining to them why this practice is wrong, what their roles are, why we need the trust support of the community.
That's Russel Barret. He's the Assistant Commissioner for Professional Standards Command in the Victoria Police. He's answering reporters' questions and in due course will be available to answer our questions as well. Fundamentally though, and the text messaging screen is already full of your concerns, it raises questions at the most fundamental levels. Why should the public trust Victoria Police? And are the police what they purport to be? And what if the Age hadn't found out that the TAC had queried these stats? would the police have fessed up anyway? And of great concern, this is the Force Command that at the same time as telling us everything's fine here, are arguing that IBAC, the corruption investigating anti-corruption body, that IBAC does not need additional powers. I think we're starting to wonder about the wisdom of continuing to block those reforms. But unethical behaviour comes in many different disguises. Simon Longstaff is the Executive Director of the Ethics Centre and is Australia's leading commentator on public ethics. Morning to you, Simon.
Morning, John.
Where do we start?
We start firstly with a very sad fact that sometimes well-intentioned policies are ill-considered and they tend to drive people to do things which we all find to be abhorrent. Police officers have got a very ancient privilege, which is the original authority of the constable, which enables them to uphold the law irrespective of a person's rank or station in society. And they're supposed to exercise discretion so that justice is truly served. You don't support that when you put in targets and then start to reward people according to those performance without thinking at all about how they might be achieved.
So I'm going to channel my junior constable inner thoughts as best as I can. I've never been a police constable, and
This should be interesting, John.
I'm not a sworn officer, but I'm going to pretend and I'm going to give you the answer. First of all, well, nobody got hurt here. Why does it matter? All we're doing is just getting the boss off our backs.
Because it's a mistake to think that the rightness or wrongness of a situation is embedded in its consequences alone. There will be a consequence in this, which is a loss of trust in the application of law by Victoria Police.
Only if anyone finds out, and who would ever know? We're just a couple of blokes in a country police station blowing in the devices in order to make ourselves look busier than we actually are.
And that's exactly what criminals say, Junior Constable John. They say, well, no one's actually got hurt, no one will find out, it's all okay. The whole point about the police force with that authority that I described before is that they uphold the law with indifference to who it is, when it is, or whatever, exercising proper discretion. And it's the violation of that oath, which is part of your sworn duty, which is a substantial part of the wrong that's done in cases like this.
But it's a bit like, stealing a biro from the stationery cupboard, isn't it?
Well, you might think that's a minor thing, but we know from a long, long history that there's a process called the normalisation of deviance, in which you start with what appears to be a very small and inconsequential thing, and progressively it becomes more and more serious because people become numb to incidents of wrongdoing, and eventually you have quite serious things done, and people, when you ask, why did you do it? They say, well, I didn't see it. Why didn't you see it? Well, everybody did it. That's just the way we did things back then.
Workplaces have all sorts of odd rules. First of all, Vic Poll, and we'll put this in a moment to the Head of Professional Standards, first of all, for years and years and years under different chief commissioners and traffic commissioners, they have vigorously even denied the existence of quotas. So how ridiculous is it now to admit that they've been faking results to meet the quotas they claimed didn't exist?
Well, it's atrocious, really. I mean, the reason they deny the existence of quotas is because they know deep down as sworn officers that it's completely at odds with their proper duty. And then when it's finally been exposed, you know what people do. I'm not saying that these people set out to cause this. Unfortunately, you see this in banking and finance, you see it in police, you see it everywhere. When you set targets of an inappropriate kind, that is, that are inconsistent with the fundamental obligations that you have, whether it's to customers or to citizens, then you can reasonably predict that this sort of thing will flow from it. And it shouldn't have been done in the first place. Instead, what they should have been doing is supporting the proper ends which the police serve, including in relation to road safety, enabling and equipping their officers to discharge those obligations in support of that purpose, rather than trying to drive it by these artificial means.
Is it worse because police take an oath to uphold the law and now they're breaking their own internal rules and laws?
Look, it adds to a general crisis of trust in institutions. We really, the police do an incredibly important role. The reason we don't take the law into our own hands is because we believe that they will dispassionately act in the interest of the community as a whole. And when you start to see that judgment being distorted by some of these internal systems, then it reflects on the quality of command for the police as a whole, that they were drawn foolishly into this kind of situation. So, as I say, they're not ill-intentioned, they're not malicious people, they've just made bad mistakes. And it's a very significant opportunity to look not just at this case, But the police command in Victoria need to be asking, are there other things that we've got embedded in our systems, our policies and our structures which could be having the same effect? Because going out and talking to everybody in the police and saying we're going to give you one-on-one counselling is only one part of a much more comprehensive response they need to look into as a result of an incident like this.
And then the most difficult issue of all, for me anyway, is does it suggest that when it suits them, individual police are quite happy to lie? When it suits them, when it achieves their objective or purpose, individual police officers in the execution of their daily sworn duties are prepared to lie.
That is a troubling thought. Look, in New South Wales, they have this phenomenon called noble cause corruption, which is where they don't do it in order to enrich themselves or secure some personal benefit. They do it because they believe it's in the public interest. That sort of thing, which starts to rationalise dishonesty in the police or the selective application of the rules as a matter of convenience or for performance, these things all distort the essential purpose for which police exist in our society. So I think you should be worried about that, as we all should. And I think that's why those in command need to look not just at issues of personal probity for individual officers, but also at the systems, policies and structures that are shaping the culture within which police is being exercised.
And then we wonder, we watch the Banking Royal Commission, we watch Question Time in Parliament, we wonder why there's an erosion of trust in institutions and authority in our society.
We don't need to wonder why, we know why.
Now we have more reasons to understand it. Thank you indeed, Simon. Simon Longstaff, Executive Director of the Ethics Centre. And those questions ranging from everything to do with the power of the anti-corruption body and unethical behaviour, which you'll put to the Head of Professional Standards, Russel Barret, when he joins us in a few moments from now. Victoria Police trying to explain the inexplicable. 258,000 alcohol breath tests falsified by rank-and-file coppers in 5 years' worth of trying to impress their bosses by achieving targets that they otherwise would have failed to meet. Targets, well, let's call them quotas. Quotas which they say don't exist. Text messages, yet another police disaster. Peter from Kew says it's all because of the police minister, Lisa Neville, who's unsackable due to her heavy faction-related union protection. That's how Peter sees it. Noble cause corruption. Oh, please, says this anonymous texter. Absolutely, police seem to lie. Their loyalty is to each other, not the society that pays them. I don't understand what the police have done with the breath test. Explain it again, says Steve. OK. So the police have breath tests. They pull you over on the side of the road, you blow into a tube, and then at the end of the day they say, OK, how many did we do and how many did we catch? If you're a police officer and the general scenario we've been given is that you're out on a country road, you're on a highway and you're sitting there as a police officer for hours doing breath tests on everyone who comes past, and you go back to the station and the sergeant or the inspector says, how many did you get, Fred? Or Shirley, and they go, yeah, I only got 73. And they go, well, that's no good. We need 200 today. How come they've got 200 down at Horsham and here we are in Dimboola and we haven't got enough? We'll have to do some more or we'll be in trouble. So they pass the machine around and they all increase the number of tests by passing it around the station and boosting the numbers artificially. That's what the TAC have basically said. TAC have declined to speak to us this morning. Police will speak to us shortly. We've been waiting and on hold for Assistant Commissioner Russel Barret from Professional Standards. He's just come through. We'll get back to taxis after we've spoken to him. Assistant Commissioner, good morning to you.
Good morning, John.
Why should the public trust the police after this disclosure that as a matter of routine over 5 years, thousands presumably of Victoria Police have lied?
So, yeah, and we don't shy away from that, John. To be fair, I don't. It's a terrible day for Victoria Police and incredibly disappointing, and we're acutely aware of our role and the necessity for the community to have trust in its policing service. And today is a day where I don't think in my 30 years of policing that I've had a more disappointing day to have to talk to some behaviours.
Well, I understand it's disappointing, but you didn't answer my question. Why should we trust you?
Well, I think what I would say to that is if I can point to a whole lot of things. You know, whilst this behaviour is incredibly disappointing and it goes against everything the Victoria Police members should hold true in terms of their values and what the community expects and their role in community, what we can point to, I would hope, is just our efforts with our partners in reducing road trauma on our roads over over a long and sustained period of time. So whilst this issue is around falsification of data, and it's an incredibly serious issue, I don't step away from that.
No, it's not the data, it's the tests. The data are just the results of falsifying breath tests.
So, yes, but so we just need to work through what is actually occurring, because these tests aren't occurring in the community, and we've seen clear evidence of reductions in harm on our roads.
Sure, but let's not get away from what's essential here, which is that individual police officers, under the supervision presumably of a local sergeant or inspector, have gamed the system. They've faked breath tests. They've done so consciously, deliberately. It's been a game for them in order to make them look busier than they actually are.
So again, we don't step away from that. In fact, I think your articulation of it is why it is so concerning. But again, for us, it's about drawing a line in the sand and now understanding why it has occurred, so we can prevent it happening again in the future.
Is it just about breath tests? If police think it's okay to cheat on breath tests, how do we know they don't think it's okay to cheat on something else?
Well, again, that leads to where and why it's important for us to understand the why and then work at the systematic approach to addressing this issue, but then look at its implications potentially at other issues. So, yeah, we need to understand the why. We need to get out and talk to our members. They need to be open and honest with us, so we can get to the crux of the behaviour.
I thought these machines were supposed to be tamper-proof. Now we're being told they've been tampered with.
So the machines, have a certain amount of data inputs that are required. But what we've identified, and again, this was new to me until recently, is that that members can do certain things to make give the appearance that a test has taken place.
The machines are supposed to be tamper-proof.
Well, again, I've clearly, as a result of what I've said, I would question where that assertion has come from. At this point in time, we need to look at the systems around the machine, because that's part of our next phase, is looking at how we prevent this type of behaviour again. What we've done today is call out that the behaviour needs to stop. We're not going to tolerate it. We're going to then undertake a massive exercise of workplace guidance and education. But whilst we're doing that, we're looking at how we put better systems and processes in place, including how the machine operates, to ensure it doesn't happen again. This is really disappointing that we actually have to do that.
Why do you need to put a procedure into place in order to say don't cheat? Do you need a special rule telling sworn police officers not to cheat?
So again, I'm incredibly disappointed that I have to undertake that type of systems approach to this critical element of our functions. But again, these are things that we identify and we will remedy. And again, yes, you are correct. It's incredibly disappointing that we have to go down this road in respect of sworn members of our organisation. I don't step away from that. It's incredibly disappointing behaviour that the community would look at and try to understand why they should not be disgusted in the organisation at this point in time. We need to understand that, accept that for what it is, and then work towards to remedying it. But what I can say is that although this issue is widespread, the efforts of our organisation to reduce road trauma with its partners are incredibly positive.
There's good things that happen too, but we're talking about the bad things today. How can it just be a coincidence that probably hundreds, if not thousands, of police over 5 years in many different places have all done the same thing?
Well, John, that's not for me.
It's not a coincidence, is it? It's something that's widespread and endemic in the force.
So we acknowledge that we have a behavioural issue across the organisation. So we haven't stepped away from that in any of our communications about this, and we are incredibly disappointed. We need to balance that, and we don't step away from the seriousness, but we always need to balance that against there are members out there, and the majority of members doing the right thing, and this tarnishes the reputation of all.
For years, Commissioner after Commissioner after Commissioner have denied that there are quotas on any offence categories. Now you're saying performance targets weren't met. Well, a performance target's just another word for a quota, isn't it?
So we don't step away from the fact that we ask our members to go out there and in terms of reducing road trauma, undertake activities. What we don't ask them to do is to falsify their behaviours or falsify how they go about that. we need to understand that, and if it is a perception of pressure because of a range of competing priorities, then we need to understand that and think through that. That is part of the next phase of our investigation. But that said, whilst we might ask our members to go out and enforce the the provisions of the road rules, we never ask them to do it by falsifying their activities.
If the newspapers hadn't found out via the TAC, when were you going to tell the public?
So we were in a phase of briefing our critical partners on what we understood in preparation for making an announcement. We had a number of key things that we needed to affirm, which we are still waiting to work through. But I was, I suppose, in a position where I was expecting to make an announcement as early next week.
It's now impossible, surely, for Victoria Police to continue to argue that the anti-corruption body IBAC does not need to have its powers expanded?
So we've made a submission to the parliamentary committee. We say that the current structure of police oversight is appropriate. We've acknowledged
that... But I'm trying to
answer your question.
You can no longer argue that after this, can you?
So, well, that's a matter for the Parliament to consider. It's not a matter for me to argue. What I would say is that I'm comfortable and confident in the current oversight regime.
Even after this?
Yes, absolutely. After this, this is clearly, Victoria Police has commenced a lengthy investigation. It hasn't dismissed this as or tried to sweep it under the carpet, and we're engaging in a process to understand it and eliminate it. I think that should give the community confidence that we are, in fact, capable of understanding the issues that present in our organisation and investigating them thoroughly.
For 5 years, in many different locations, simultaneously and apparently without coordination, hundreds if not thousands of cops, with the open knowledge of their own supervisors, have faked breath test results to the point where there's 250,000 and more, and you think the supervisory and oversight procedures are adequate?
So if I can distinguish, because I think you may be pulling two pieces together. Part of our investigation is the supervision practices within our organisation, and that's within scope of the next phase of our investigation, because one, we need to understand why it occurred, two, why it was allowed to occur, and three, if members were aware of it, why they didn't call it out. They're the fundamentals we need to understand about our culture and our behaviours. In respect of my comfort with oversight, that's in respect of the current arrangements for oversighting of police investigations, with IBAC and the Victoria Police Professional Standards Command.
Who loses their job over this?
Well, I don't think anyone does at this stage. But we need to understand it and investigate it. This is serious behaviour, but at this stage, we are embarking on a phased approach to understand it, so we can prevent.
We don't want to understand it. We do understand it. I think we understand it too well. Your predecessor, Brett Gearan, was disclosed to have false identities, racist attitudes being expressed on social media while he was in charge of professional standards and ethical behaviour. You've been given the hospital pass. It's now on your watch. Surely you have to take a somewhat more robust approach to enforcing the very, very vigorous rules that theoretically are available to you but seem very rarely to be used.
So what I would say is that in understanding it, it's no point in me at this point in time speculating on potential outcomes without me fully understanding what it looks like. And at this stage, I need to work through a more lengthy investigation. That will be headed up by Neil Cromrie, so give the community...
Former Police Commissioner.
Yeah, absolutely, and someone who's done lengthy and complex investigations on behalf of the Victorian Government. So someone who the Victorian community should have enormous confidence in leading or heading up this type of investigation.
Thank you for answers to all of my questions. We'll go to the talkback after the news. That's Assistant Commissioner Russel Barret, who's in charge of professional standards at Victoria Police.